Backups are important. And you know, when you think about backups, you tend to think about backing up user data. But then there's also the aspect of backing up the applications that you have on a system. And not only that, but the most important thing, I believe, is backing up the settings for those applications. And that's something that is often ignored. Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. Today, we're going to talk about using a custom Rescuezilla boot USB to perform an image backup. So Rescuezilla is a bootable ISO image that can make an exact clone of a disk or make a backup image of that disk. And I like making my Rescuezilla disk images to backup folders, which are on iSCSI target drives, both for performance and reliability. And watch my video from November of 2023 entitled iSCSI Fast Network-Based Storage, where we talk about how to set up an iSCSI target and how to have an iSCSI initiator connect to that target disk space. And Rescuezilla supports images on local disks, NFS shares, and CIF shares, but it does not out of the box support connection to iSCSI targets. And so Rescuezilla boots a live USB and does not store any persistent data. So live Linux USBs and CDs are booted from ISO 9660 formatted images, which are by nature read-only, and I think that historically dates back to the time when we used optical media. And live USBs or CDs provide a RAM disk for volatile data, which is lost upon shutdown or reboot. So really, it is not persistent data storage. And some Linux live media, for example Ubuntu and Debian, provide a means to have a persistent data partition on USB bootable devices, but that's not always very easy to create. And programs that write an ISO image to a USB disk are programs like Balena Etcher, UNetbootin, MKUSB, and also the Linux DD command. Balena Etcher does not support persistent data partitions. I mean, you can create a bootable USB from an ISO on with the use of Balena Etcher, but the end result does not have any way to create a persistent data partition. And UNetbootin supports persistent partitions, but only from very specific Ubuntu ISO media. And MKUSB supports persistent partitions, but does not recognize Rescuezilla as a standard Ubuntu, despite being based on Ubuntu 24.04, which is Noble Numbat. And Linux DD command has issues with manually copying the correct EFI and grub entries required for Rescuezilla, even though the DD command is supposed to make an exact copy of the disk. In my tests, I had several fails. So then there's a program that I didn't mention earlier called Ventoy. For those of you that watch the channel regularly, I've had a video on iVentoy, which is a network bootable. That is, it boots through Pixie or iPixie, and it will allow you to boot up an image that is on an ISO, but one that is network-based. And Ventoy is an older version of that, or an original version, that rather than being network bootable, it allows you to build a USB boot disk that has many ISOs on it. It gives you a menu and will allow you to boot from any one ISO. And when I put Rescuezilla on a Ventoy disk, then I had to take the extra step of configuring a JSON persistent file for Rescuezilla. That did not work immediately, and after much testing, I was able to get it working, but it wasn't very straightforward or easy to configure. So what was my solution? Well, Rufus is an open source Windows utility that can create a bootable Rescuezilla USB, and it can provide that USB with persistence, meaning that you can reboot it and the data that you had in your previous session is still retained. And we're going to create the required USB, that is a Clonezilla bootable USB, or Rescuezilla, I should say, not Clonezilla, Rescuezilla bootable USB with Rufus. And that CD is going to, or that USB is going to have persistence. And so we're going to boot the Rescuezilla USB, and then we're going to make the changes on it in order to support automatic configuration to iSCSI targets on your network. And we'll use my iSCSI targets as a use case. Be sure to watch the show notes, because the show notes are going to show all the details so that you can reproduce this on your own network. And you will then be able to use your Rescuezilla to make image backups to your iSCSI targets on your network, and you'll actually have a very high performance backup system using Rescuezilla. And so this is very reliable for your image backups. To start with, here we are in Gparted, and I have a 16 gigabyte USB thumb drive here installed, and this is actually the partition table for the drive when I built it with MK-USB. And I did get it working, but it's really kind of a mess, because when the USB boots up, it gives you an option to boot it from the partition number 3, partition number 4, and I think partition number 5. And so it's really kind of a mess, as you can see here. So we're not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and go in here and right click and delete this partition, right click and delete this partition, right click and delete this partition, right click and delete this one, and finally this one. And now we have all unallocated space. To make that take effect in Gparted, I say apply all operations, and once I do, we will have a blank slate as far as this particular USB device is concerned. On my system, I don't have Windows natively running. Instead, I have Windows running on a Windows 11 Incus virtual machine. And so if I do an ls USB on my Linux desktop, and I look down through my list of connected USB devices, I have a SanDisk device, which is at 0781 is the vendor ID, and 5591 is the product ID. So now I'm going to go ahead and go off to the Lex console, and you can see here that I have added a new device which I call USB drive, and it has vendor ID 0781 and product ID 5591, and that assures that when we boot up our Windows 11 that I will have a access to my USB device. And so here I'm going to do an Incus start win11 -- console equals VGA. If you have a physical Windows 11 device, by all means use it, but I do not. So I'm going ahead and starting this up, and then I'll go ahead and go full screen on it, and it doesn't take very long for my Incus 11 VM to boot up and be able to offer login if it weren't in the middle of doing an update, which is so typical of Windows. Now that I'm logged into my Windows, I went ahead and went over to the Brave browser, and I went to rufus.ie/en/, and this is where you can download a copy of Rufus. And so if we go down here and simply look at the downloads, you'll see the option to download it along with some general information about how to use Rufus. Secondly, we want to head over to Rescuezilla at rescuezilla.com/download. And here at the very top, it says download the latest live image, which is Rescuezilla version 2.5.1 as of this video. And we can click on it and it will give us an option to download it. So I've already downloaded both Rufus and the Rescuezilla ISO. And Rufus is very easy to install because I picked the portable install, and that really means the version that didn't require any direct install. If I double click it here and just say, yes, I want to go ahead and run this, it will bring up the Rufus screen. And then from here, it will automatically see the only USB device that I have out there, which is this USB that's 16 gigabytes that we cleaned off with gparted just a little while ago. And then the option here is disk or ISO image. So I'll go ahead and click select, and I'll go ahead and specify my Rescuezilla image that I downloaded and I have a copy of here on my desktop. And so I'll go ahead and open it. And then we have the option for creating an MBR with the target system on the BIOS. And I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I want instead a GPD. And then down here, it will give me an option for formatting it. And the most important thing we have up here is the persistence option. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that persistence all the way up to really all of the free space that we have on this drive, and that happens to be 12 gigabytes. And so here again, I have a GPT partition scheme, UEFI, I've specified my Rescuezilla disk, and I really don't have to change anything else. And I'll go ahead and click start. And it'll warn me that it's going to go ahead and clean off that disk, but it also says that Rufus has detected that the ISO you've selected has a UEFI bootloader that has been revoked, and that will produce a security violation screen when Secure Boot is enabled on a fully up-to-date UEFI system. So in order to boot any other disk, you have to go into your BIOS and you have to turn Secure Boot off if you had Secure Boot on. And that's one of the requirements to boot these bootable USBs that we're creating. And so I'll go ahead and say OK. And it says, hey, all the data on that 16 gigabyte disk is going to be destroyed. And that's fine. And I'll click OK again. And now it begins formatting the disk, and then it will copy over the ISO and create a persistence partition on it for us. After a few minutes, it will indicate that Rufus has completed imaging the USB device. And at this point, you can go ahead and close Rufus, and we're through with Windows, so I can go ahead and shut down Windows as well. And then we'll be right back and take a look at some additional settings. Here we are back inside of gparted, and we can see that Rufus has created two partitions. One that is called a main data partition, and it's formatted FAT32. And then we have the larger 12 gigabyte Linux persistence volume, which is labeled Casper-RW by convention, and that's one of the things that allows it to be a persistence volume, and that volume is 12 gigabytes in size. And here I'm booting my desktop machine up from the new Rescuezilla USB, and we are going to select USB partition 1. and then we simply select the default of English and then start Rescuezilla. And Rescuezilla USB will boot pretty quickly and go to its desktop. And although it doesn't really look like it here, this Rescuezilla boot USB is actually based on Ubuntu 24.04. A few seconds after the Rescuezilla interface comes up, here we have Rescuezilla, and I've selected my 4 terabyte NVMe drive for my desktop. I go to Next, and it lists both of the partitions. And then at that point, I can go to Next, and it says, where would you like to store the destination for the backup? We don't really have anything here, so we go ahead and look at shared over the network. And as you can see, we have an option of SMB, Microsoft Shares, or we have an option for NFS. The next thing I want to do here is start up a terminal. And in that terminal, I'm going to go ahead and make a folder for a folder named test, and then I'll go ahead and create a file with the touchscott.txt. And then we have those 2 files located here. This is going to be to test our persistence on reboot. After a quick reboot, we go ahead and do an ls in the terminal. We have scott.txt and the test folder, and so we know persistence is working. Our next step is we want to go ahead and remove those files since we no longer need them. So I'm going to do a remove on the test folder and a remove on scott.txt. And now I want to go ahead and install the iSCSI protocol, and I do that with a sudo apt install open-iSCSI-y so I don't get prompted. Now that iSCSI is installed, I want to go ahead and do a discovery on my iSCSI targets. So I do a discovery on the address of my NAS where my iSCSI targets are located, and it does find all 4 of my iSCSI drives. Now I'm going to go out and edit the iSCSI daemon configuration file, and unfortunately I notice here that I was lacking the nano editor, so I did a sudo apt install nano. Here we are in the iSCSI-D configuration file, and we want to scroll down, and you'll see that node.startup is set equal to manual, and we want to go ahead and comment that out. Then you want to come up here and uncomment node.startup equals to automatic, and if your iSCSI targets require authentication, you'll want to also uncomment the username and the password for your iSCSI. At this point, we can go ahead and launch Rescuezilla again since we're connected to our iSCSI devices. And now, if we do the backup command, you'll see that the drive to backup will list all of the drives that are available to us, including all of our iSCSI targets. Now I go ahead and click Next. I still want to back up the 2 partitions on that drive. And this time I want to send them to an iSCSI target, and I'm going to send it to number 8 here, which is the Rescuezilla backup iSCSI folder or iSCSI target that I had created. So it goes ahead and scans that device for backups, and I already have, I believe, 3 backups located on that particular device. So it's going to go ahead and scan them and log them and tell me that those are the ones that currently exist there. And here we are with my 3 backups. Then I'll go ahead and click Next. It goes ahead and says this is the name of the current backup. It gives a date and timestamp for it. I choose my compression format. gzip is the default. And then from there I can click Next, and it will give me a summary of the fact that I want to back up my NVMe 4 terabyte drive. I'm backing up the 2 partitions on that drive. I'm using the gzip format, and I'm writing that to an iSCSI target, and here is the iSCSI target. After rebooting, I noticed my iSCSI targets were not automatically signed into, and so I needed to issue this command as well, sudo iSCSI adm-m node-o update and start.automatic. Due to the magic of video, we do one more quick reboot of the Rescuezilla USB, launch the Rescuezilla app, and it goes out and identifies the disk drives that are connected to the system. And you can see here that it has all of my iSCSI drives. I'm going to back up the NVMe drive that is in this machine and both of the partitions. And my backup is going to go to an iSCSI target, the one that has the label Rescuezilla. I click Next, and it goes ahead and scans the folder on that iSCSI drive for current backups, and I have 3 backups located there. Here are the 3 backups on that iSCSI target, and I'm going to create a 4th backup by clicking Next. The default name of the backup will be a timestamp for now, along with image Rescuezilla. I click Next, and I'm going to select gzip as the default compression mechanism. So the source drive is the NVMe drive. We're backing up both partitions on the NVMe drive, and then we're doing a gzip compression at level 6, and it's going to be written into the location on the iSCSI target that you see here. And then if I click Next, it would go ahead and initiate that backup. So in summary, we created a Rescuezilla bootable USB with a persistent data partition using Rufus in Windows 11. And I used a Windows 11 Incus virtual machine connected virtually to my USB thumb drive to image the USB. And we added iSCSI support to the Rescuezilla disk. And we configured the Rescuezilla disk to automatically connect to iSCSI targets on the network. And this allows network-based backup images and disk cloning using Rescuezilla, which works for all disk and partition types. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can hear about my future videos.